Good evening and welcome to Career Is Skills series. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Sorry we're a little bit late starting, but thank you so much for joining. Thank you especially to those who have been with us throughout the whole series. We're very excited to be doing the final episode of the series tonight. So yeah, thank you and welcome. My name is Claudine Adiemi. I am the CEO of Career Ear. Career Ear is a platform that kind of exists to make sure that every individual has the ability to achieve their full career potential, essentially. And so the way that we do that is that we've created this online community which allows people to really get all the advice and insights that they need so that they can make informed choices about their careers. So we have something for everyone. If you are someone that is thinking about your career, maybe it's your first ever career, maybe you're changing career, and you want to ask some questions, you want to learn about that industry, that particular job function, jump on the platform. It's completely free to use, ask your questions, and you'll get answers from people who are in industry doing those jobs. If you are someone who wants to give back and mentor in a light touch way and answer those questions and share your own experiences and insights, again, join us, join the movement, completely free to use. Super easy to use and obviously highly impactful on the individuals that you're answering questions for. And finally, if you are a community organization, we strongly believe in collaboration. If we don't collaborate, we don't have the impact that we want to have on people's lives. So join us, get involved, jump on the platform and share your events, your opportunities with the community. I'm sure they would love to receive that information. But today is actually all about skills, right? So we're here for the skills series. Just to give a bit of context, if you haven't heard it before, this is all about really trying to think about how we address the skills gap. So we know that we have a massive skills gap in the UK, but also beyond. There's some recent research that came out from the World Economic Forum that was talking about 85 million jobs globally are going to be displaced, but equally, we've got 97 million jobs predicted to come in over the coming years, and most countries around the world aren't quite ready from a skills perspective to flourish in those industries and in those roles. And so we really need to start thinking about how we're going to make sure that we are changing our attitudes towards learning and making sure that we are equipped with the skills to thrive in our careers and at work day in, day out, and whether that's now or whether that's in the future. And there's a massive problem with that. So we know that there's been a massive decline on spend by employers on their employees' training. I think £5.1 billion over the last decade. And we know that for a lot of adults who leave compulsory education, almost half of them never study again, even non-formally. So it's really about how are we going to make sure that all of these individuals, whether we are, located in London or outside of London, whether we're Black, whether we come from a poor background, a middle class background, whoever we are, regardless of our background, regardless of where we are, we're all equipped with the right skills for the future. So this series has all been about interviewing some crazy impressive people, people whose mindsets just blow me away, and really just tapping into their journeys and thinking about how they've kind of gone on this journey of developing various different skills, how those skills serve them, the value out of those skills, so that we can just learn from them, right? I'm learning too. So that's kind of the purpose of this series. And we've had some incredible people so far. And today we are joined by Marvin Harrison. Now, before I introduce Marvin, just want to remind you, you can drop any of your questions in the comments, whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube. Sorry if you're watching the replay, but if you're watching us live, you can drop your questions in the comments box. Marvin would love to hear your questions rather than mine anyway, so definitely do that. But I'd like to kind of read an intro to Marvin just so you can get a feel for how impressive he is. So, Marvin Harrison is an inspirational leader who is able to deliver business goals and vision using sound strategy, communication, and people management. Respected as a credible source of knowledge of community strategy, Marvin is able to drive culture, change, and deliver tangible results across business, projects, and campaigns. His leadership experience as the founder and driving force behind Dope Black CIC, an educational and healing platform designed to improve the outcomes of Black people, has seen him become the voice of the Black community across the UK, US, and African continent. Marvin is dedicating his future to supporting businesses and organizations in their evolution to becoming more representative of the diverse cities they operate in and the dynamic consumers they serve. Everybody, welcome Marvin Harrison. And if we were at a real event, we'd be like, yay! Hey, Marvin, you're on mute. Let me figure out how to unmute you. Can you hear me? You with us?
How you doing? Should we clap for ourselves?
Sorry?
Should we clap for ourselves?
I'm clapping for you. Thank you for joining. I'm so pleased that you are here. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm really good. We are in lockdown, but there's lots of positive things happening, so I'm trying to focus on those things. But I look forward to when we can move around.
Yeah, it's the only way. You have to take each day as it comes and just count those blessings, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm conscious that like this hour always flies by. So I just want to jump straight in and starting with how we start with all of our guests and just trying to understand from your perspective what a skill even means to you, how you define a skill and what that looks like.
For me, I think skill is something that you work at. So like talent is that natural element, and then the skill is the part that you work out and you perfect. And so it's funny because my skill is based on an attribute that I have, but it's not necessarily, it's not something that I would have been present to at the time. And so I think over the last maybe 15 years, I've honed my strategic viewpoint to be able to add value to different businesses and organizations. So that's pretty much what it is. It's what that talent that you work at, and it becomes a skill.
And what is that for you? You said that that skill for you is the attribute that you have. What can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think when I dug deeper into this, for me, it's about pattern recognition and visual mapping. And I think those two things are things that I've always had in me. So like, pattern recognition, in school you'd get there's like 2, 4, and then what's the missing part. I would always be able to answer those things like just naturally. It just come to me and I could see it. But that also in terms of like even things like spot the inconsistency. If you had like a whole bunch of dots and one of the dots was like upside, square or something, I could always spot those things. And so I just realized there's something about my observations that allow me to then see the world in a different way and bring large amounts of information into one understanding. And so I had to practice it and hone it. And, I had a marketing degree, and originally I thought I was a creative, but it's not necessarily I'm a creative per se. I think it's just my ability to interpret the things that are around me. And I've honed that over a very long period of time.
Interesting. And I mean, you gave an example going right back to school days, right? How conscious were you at that young age that you had this skill of kind of pattern recognition?
So what's really interesting, I never even saw it as a positive. I was just very aware and present to the idea that I was different and that I saw things differently, and I looked at the world differently. And then I didn't really understand how to use it and employ it. Up until sort of my mid-20s. Even when I was working, I didn't really understand what it was, the actual skill. So I did different types of marketing and not really realizing that actually what my gift is the strategic overview and being able to take data and turn it into, a plan and a strategy for a business. That is something that came a lot later after many other ways of working didn't work. So it's in many ways it's fortunate, but it does take a while to really be able to accept your gift. And also turn it into something that can be commoditized.
I'm going to come back to that point about accepting your gift. But was there any kind of, moment where you kind of realized that link between the pattern recognition piece and the position where you were in, where you're actually losing that skill in a working environment from a strategy perspective?
To be honest, I only really discovered it near the end, and I think I reversed engineered and I looked at what my career had done to date, and again looking at pattern recognition, I was able just to see where I did certain things and how it got me into where in my career was I really strong, and added a significant amount of value, and where in scenarios where I wasn't. And I think looking at where I wasn't, it was because I didn't have the ability to have an overview. I didn't have the data points that I needed to make the decisions that I needed. And so I realized that I needed to stop being in different types of marketing. So I was working in CRM in the beginning, and e-commerce. And so my first job was at News International. It's now called News UK. My first proper commercial job. And I was working for Fabulous magazine, and my job was to monetize the website. And in many ways, there are things in there that, you know, I do enjoy. I enjoyed the numbers and coming back and making revenue, but my actual gift wasn't present in that job. So I kept on falling down at, you know, jobs that I thought were great that I could do. And then as soon as I became a strategist, it all made sense, and the passion came out, and I felt like I was. It's almost just like I felt like I came into my power with my career, and it all ever since then has kind of accelerated really quickly.
Wow, nice. And that process of kind of getting to that point where you realized what your skill was, and reflecting back, and that feeding into where you are now, that whole process, how intentional was that? Was that just something that's just happened over time and you just continue to think about it? Or was that, I need to sit down, get a pen and paper out, and like actually kind of work out what my skill is, what I'm good at, where I'm going? Yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
I would say my thing, and I would attach curiosity to it as well. So always being curious. I've never accepted what's been presented as fact, and not from a place of fear or a place of insecurity. Just like, but why does that work that way? And wanting to understand. I wasn't actually very good at school, and my way of picking up information is actually through audio. So when I hear something, I can interpret it in a particular way, but when I read it, it doesn't always land in the same way. And so I realized that those differences made sure that I listened more than I spoke, and I also listened more than I read. And then being able to gather that level of information allowed me to take, you know, a view on this type of work. But yeah, it did take a very long time. I think the catalyst ended up being so much things were going wrong. There was one point where I was getting fired very often. There was probably like an 18-month period where I just couldn't keep a job, and I was going in, and I didn't really even have faith that I was actually going to keep it. So I think maybe that played into it, but I also just felt I wasn't happy. And even though, like, you know, every job was an increase in money, when I started looking at the money and I stopped looking at the job, my career really stagnated quite heavily. And the second I started thinking about, I just want to do what's going to make me happy. And I would say that happened in probably 2013, 14. So only 7 years ago. Ever since then, I've been able to, you know, I feel like I'm myself at work. I don't bring a character or an act, and that frees me up to really enjoy my job and add the value in my own perspective. And I think that's the most important part.
Wow. I have so many questions. Okay, so I want to go back to that point that you were talking about accepting a gift, or accepting your gift that you have. How? If you're in a position where you kind of don't necessarily see a particular attribute or skill or whatever it is that you seem to have some kind of talent for, but you don't recognize its value, how do you go from that position to actually, I'm going to accept this and I'm going to kind of make lemonade from it, basically?
Yeah, I think for me, it was failure. That's what really drove it home for me. And I was tired of failing. And I think also then, you know, when you're failing or you feel like at a particular low point in your life, you look for answers in a different way. You're just open to information. You're like, I've done everything that they told me to do, and I've worked in all the companies that they said that you should want to work in, and I don't enjoy it. And at the point of it not working for like maybe the 7th, 8th, maybe 9th time, I was just like open to what it could be. And actually mine kind of fell in my lap in many ways. Because I came into, I basically had left the workforce and I'd gone into my own business, and it was basically just commercializing brand partnership stuff. And I wasn't really enjoying that either. I think somebody one day quit, they quit on me and got a job that paid more. And I was just like, I actually cannot be bothered to replace you. I was just like, this isn't a good sign. This is like business leadership. This is not me enjoying my work. This is me being a business leader. And I wasn't enjoying the other side of it. And I think actually 2 days before, she had said that she was sick. We'll do quotes here. And she probably wasn't. She probably was on a job interview. But I was like, this is the kind of stuff you got to deal with. And I just wasn't enjoying any of it. But I stumbled upon mine, but I think that the ability to accept the pattern in your life that keeps reoccurring is important. And I think, for me, coming up and being analytical and curious, I think that kept on coming up. And when I wasn't being able to do that, it felt like I wasn't fulfilling my potential. So I just accepted it rather than see myself as different, because it's really tied into lots of personal stuff as well, just like how I see the world and being slightly an outcast in a weird way, because you're just different. And the way I process information was different, and not everybody got it. And so, turning that into a career is the most amazing thing I've ever been able to do, because not everybody is able to do it. But I think mainly because they resist the natural urges. Because you think about the things that we're told to work for particular companies, or we need to be a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant, but we never just get told to access the thing that brings us joy. And so because of that, you end up numbing that feeling, because it's not what you're told you're supposed to be doing. I remember being, I used to love drama. I loved it. I used to be able to, like, I was one of those children that was so emotionally complex. I could like cry on cue. I could be rage on cue. I could be like charming on cue. And I just remember,
I'm telling you to cry right now, but I won't.
well, I remember them kind of weaponizing drama against me, because they realized I liked it so much, and then being like, if you don't do this, you're not gonna be able to go to drama class. So obviously, I'm one of those people that double down if you threaten me. And so and then they kept me out of the class, and I just remember instantly losing love for it in that moment. But I was like, actually, what would happen if I was able to explore that? I could have been Idris Elba. I could have been James Bond. Who knew? But I think the main thing is just, the not being able to access that particular part. You then adjust and create a different version of yourself, and create a different version until one of them actually works. And I think you end up with a version that isn't actually who you are. It's just who you think you need to be to survive or to grow. And I think that's where the problem lies.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people will relate to that. How brave do you need to be to pursue something that just genuinely makes you happy?
I kind of feel like we are all brave. I think it's brave to sit there and be suppressed, to sit there and like suppress yourself. I think it just takes a lot of, I'm going to call it gumption, but there's a lot of gumption to sit there unhappy and repeating the same things. I can't do it. I fundamentally cannot be unhappy. The second I feel like unhappiness getting too comfortable around me, I have to reject and recreate something. It just doesn't resonate with me. Like, why would I want to do that? But look, I think people have different, buttons that are being pushed. Some people have the need to be secure. That's greater than anything else. And they need to have a job and know they're going to be paid every month. And it's not for everybody. And I think sometimes we make this kind of optimum human being who can work in a career like that, in a job, and perform at a high level. But it's not for everybody, man. And I think business ownership isn't for everybody, and working isn't for everybody. I think you just got to understand yourself. What's my ability or my connection to risk in this area. And I'm fearless when it comes to risk. I don't believe in, being small because I'm scared of something. So that actually makes me bigger, if anything, actually. And that's just my drug. That's my challenge. That's what I need to be content with, because it can also create scenarios where I'm like, how are you going to pay rent? Or like, I spent all my money in a week. So that all those behaviors are connected. So yes, it's high risk, high reward. And I think I've become a lot more centered in recent years. So I was fortunate.
Yeah, interesting. And in terms of this kind of, I just want to touch on this happiness point again. I mean, we've spoken to loads of people who, aren't happy per se doing in their job, but I don't know, I guess prioritize a number of other things. So prioritize, being able to put food on the table, being able to care for their family, being able to buy a house at some point and get that level of security that they've potentially not been familiar with in the past, and so on. How do you trade off the things that you kind of the other things that you need against the kind of happiness piece, if that makes sense? There's a lot of go on.
I think the key thing is that we build lives that we can't sustain, and I think that's partially some of the problem. So I think the picture of what life should look like tells you that you must have house, car, wife, kids, whatever. And then you get all of those things. And then actually to sustain all of those things, you have to create a life that can pay for it all. And then this is where a lot of desperation kicks in, or this is where a lot of depression kicks in, because then how can you be free? What happens if you want to change your mind tomorrow? Then you have a 17 reasons why you can't. Your mortgage, you give some money to your mum, your wife, your kids got a private school, your car costs this much. So you just can't move. And so, I'm actually in the process now of like shedding all of those like sort of undeclared commitments, they're called, where I feel like I owe someone something and I can't say no to it. Just probably not going to be of any use to anybody else. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You cut out for a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I think if I'm not present, then I'm not going to be used to anybody else. And I think too often we center other people, even my children. Like, I think people overestimate how much you need to give your children for them to be healthy. And actually, it doesn't require that much. If you're actually a clean-hearted person, they watch you and see you. They pick up on that more than the things that you say and how much money you have. So the job is, if you're happy, they watch you and they mirror that, rather than it being, you feel like I must do all these things for my children to see a sort of performative adult nature. And I think too much, especially in our generation, we don't even know who our parents were. And I think that's also problematic. We didn't know the cost of them being them and looking after us and raising us. They never told us. And I think it's really important that we do see that side of things. I think it's fundamentally important.
Interesting. You mentioned being a father, so let's talk about that. I'm very interested in understanding, obviously you've created Dope Black, but that started with Dope Black Dads and all about changing that narrative of Black fathers. I think you do a lot of kind of peer-to-peer learning and sharing with other Black dads and things like that. Throughout that kind of process, which has been going on, what, a couple of years? Been running that? Yeah. Are there kind of skills and things that you've learned through that as you're kind of learning about that kind of fatherhood piece, or indeed sharing those experiences with others, that have had a direct impact on your kind of trajectory in your career and the skills that you're using in the work environment as well? So just thinking about that transferability.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, it's the redesign of masculinity is connects it all, really. And I think the way I parent and the way who I am in my job and who I am in life is connected to how I perceive and interact with myself as a man. And we've always talked about how we need to redesign masculinity, because I think we only showed a very limited view of what it looks like. And then it trapped people into like a particular way of behaving, regardless of what's happening. You can't cry and like, get back up and dust yourself off. It's like, these things really trap men. And I think that's the reason why men become toxic, because there's no way to show any other complex emotion. It's just, you're forced to be hard even when you don't want to be. And I think anybody that understands, who's even been to therapy, can start to get the idea that if you don't have releases and you're not able to access all parts of your personality, then it does trap you into a particular path. And I think when I look at how I changed my view of masculinity, I'm able to see people in the workplace in a completely different way. I understand I bring a different energy to the workplace. Like, I'm always laughing and smiling. I'm always being ridiculous as much as possible, because that's just who I am. I don't want to adjust and have to be like, someone's perception of professional is that you don't laugh and you don't make any jokes and you're not just enjoying it. So I really enjoy my job. I really enjoy my team. And I don't want to change my approach, to be completely honest. And I cry when I cry, and I'm stressed out when I'm stressed out. And I don't hide those things. I think it's important that people even see that, business leaders it's complex. Leadership is lonely. It's like it's a very isolating place to be. And I think one of the things that's really come up quite often recently is sort of like, in terms of leadership, is this sort of model of perfection where leaders and, as a chief executive of 2 organizations, I must, and the weight of the like, I must as a business leader. And I think sometimes it's like, you got to protect your energy. And this is why, business leaders always stick with other business leaders, because they want to be able to share what that burden is like, that weight is like. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right just because you lead an organization that you have to remove your personality, your soul, your observation to be able to lead it. I think you can lead it as who you actually are, but build it in the vision of who you are as well. And I think Dope Black and Beloved are so me. Anyone that knows me, it's very complex. It's not just a linear, like, we're a positive organization. It's a complex relationship. I have a complex relationship with myself and with the people around me, but our intention and our values are really, really clear. And we're happy to be held to account on those values. And I think that's what I've learned more of, and I apply that to my business.
Nice. And so in terms of thinking about you talking about leadership, can you tell us a little bit more about kind of your particular leadership style and how you empower other people to kind of overcome that hurdle of kind of being a bit more expressive, maybe with their emotions, or at least just kind of being able to be their whole self, basically, and not having to change who they are because they're in the workplace or something like that?
I would say that this is my maybe third or fourth authentic attempt to lead. And I learn something every single time that I'm in that leadership position, whether it's a different organization or slightly different context. But, you know, it's something that I'm really aware that it's really closely connected to who I am as a person and how comfortable I am with myself and how comfortable I am making decisions, or how comfortable I am not being liked or being popular or agreed with. And I think a lot of those things used to drive my behavior in leadership historically. And I think now there's a lot more clarity because my values are really clear, and I think I live them every day, and I'm really present to what they are. And so it's become a lot easier. But I think definitely maybe probably longer than that, maybe 8-9 years ago, when I first had my first business, we had a marketing consultancy. And I just liked the job. I didn't really want to lead. I just liked the job. And then I realized that I could scale it. So I just thought, you know, I'm just going to scale this business because I can, and people are asking for our services. So we'll hire some people. But then I became a business lead, and I didn't want to be. I wanted to do the strategy. I wanted to be on the campaigns. I wanted to be on the ground doing the work. And so, you know, it didn't work for me then. But now, and I think it's really deeply connected to just spending a lot of time answering questions about myself, I think I'm just way more prepared. But I definitely have realized that it's a lot more isolating. But I think there is a duty and an obligation to like challenge how organizations have historically been run. And I don't think people really have done that. I think they're like, just the cultural disruption of leadership still needs to happen. We still become an act. We still, you know, pretend that we don't feel things, and we kind of are very disconnected, and we don't share information. My organization is full of heart. You know, the other day, my business partner led a meditation for my team, and like I joined the call slightly late, and everyone was just in the zone. And I was like, that's the kind of business I want to join. I want to join Zoom calls like this. I want to be around people who are being mindful. And you know, we do yoga, and we're constantly, sometimes we just have meetings that aren't even about work. And I appreciate people find that stuff really difficult, because it's like everything must be driven towards efficiency and capitalism, and you park, you know, things at home. But sometimes people just have stuff going on. Like, we have a community group, it's about the Black community. This has been a very challenging year for everybody. And so, you know, if I just come on and I'm like, guys, we got to do this, we got to push and go harder, and we missed this target here, and like, what's going on, and what's the structure? People are just like, this is too much. It offends me. You know, you need to connect with them. And I think what happened is I was consulting somewhere in the middle of the protests for Black Lives Matter, and there was this complete disconnection from the fact that Black people were like fighting for their lives in this moment. And the whole company, no one really acknowledged it. And they would come in and be like, Marvin, how was your weekend? And I was like, well, on Saturday, I did a speech to Black Lives Matter UK. About 25,000 people were tuned in. And then the Saturday afternoon, I thought about I should go to the protest, but I felt bad because COVID is so important. And then I cried on Sunday because of the guilt. And then me and my wife, I'm like telling this story, and they're looking at me like, we thought you just went golf or something. I'm like, no, this is, you don't have the emotional intelligence to be aware that, my life and my work is all interconnected. I'm one person all the time. I don't switch it on and off.
Yeah, no, I can completely relate to that. I don't know if it's me or you, but can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty clear. I just want to kind of go back to kind of skills in particular, and thinking about where you are right now. So you've kind of got to this position where, like, you've really identified what you're awesome at. You've honed that. You've accepted that gift and turned it into something amazing for yourself and continuing to kind of lead from that place. What's the next step? So what's the skill that you're kind of trying to learn now? What are you trying to get better at?
My big question now is, how do I stay high performing over a long period of time, and especially when I'm challenged by something? That for me is the holy grail, is being that consistent person all the time, but an authentic, consistent person. I don't want to turn into a bot, but I should be able to continue my 2 roles in those organizations, even if things are happening in the macro. And that really is about employing my self-care and making sure I have a perspective. I have mentors who can challenge me and go through things with me, that I'm continually upskilling myself and getting better. So it just means that you use different tools, and I probably use less energy than I did 10 years ago, but it still at times can be really challenging. And I think that for me is the balance. If I nail that, I think that's where, I start to reach another level of what I can do.
And with that, I mean, you mentioned, for example, upskilling yourself. Is that something that's kind of a formal developing skills piece? So are you kind of finding courses and studying, or are you kind of identifying things that you want to learn and meeting people that can kind of help you get there through the mentors, for example? What does that kind of process look like from a practical perspective for our viewers?
Yeah, so my learning style has always been, whenever I'm stuck, I research it to understand it. And the good thing is that, you can learn a lot of really random things when you're challenged by particular things. But I apply that, it's a bit like strategy. So you work in advertising long enough, you work on enough clients that are completely random. I've done automotive, FMCG, I've done technology, I've done beauty, makeup, things that are not even for my audience. So I just acquire ridiculous amounts of information that probably is useless in many ways. But I take that approach to everything. So if I don't know something, I've been doing a lot of contracts recently and really studying and understanding how contracts are structured and what the language means, and how to, make sure our business is governed authentically, correctly. Is so important, and that's something that I've been diving into. Would I take a law course? Probably not. I think it's just about understanding what it is to do. I don't want to acquire knowledge for the sake of knowledge, just to say that I have knowledge. I want it so I'm able to execute the things that I want to execute.
And where do you draw the line? So how much knowledge do you try and kind of acquire for a particular thing before you then just find an expert to kind of take that thing on?
Well, for me, and even more, the more our business grows, experts are just fundamental. Before I would be doing, I can do a bit of design, I can do a bit of video editing, I can do enough. I've learned enough over the years that I can do pretty much most functions within a business to a credible level. I've done, bookkeeping, accounting for myself over a long period of time. But now I don't demark from what my gift is, and I pay people to do that stuff for me. And I think one of the key things and the freedom of doing that is the fact that I have, if you have a budget to do these things, then it's a lot easier to focus on the business. But when it's not, many people who are starting out or have small businesses have to take on 5-6 roles. And that's what really ends up making your business challenged, is because you're trying to be all of those things while leading and having vision, having perspective, making sure that the revenues even come in on time. And I think, there was one business that I had when I was in my mid-20s, and we just accrued so much money, but I never actually collected it. I didn't, to do the accounting, actually make sure they sent it to me. I was just doing the work and blitzing. And then, you do 2 payrolls and you're like, right, oh my gosh, I got to pay. Where's it? Yeah. And we had to go and crawl back that money, and everyone's always slow with paying. So, again, when you're really, that's my inexperience of not being focused on the money and being focused on the actual experience and enjoying the work, and forgetting that if I don't get paid by them on time, then I can't pay my team, and the burden became on me. And I just remember that as a real good lesson of, as a simple example.
Did you collect your money though?
I collected it all.
Of course. I don't even know why I asked. Okay, cool. So on the flip side then, what's the kind of most challenging experience that you've had when it comes to trying to develop a skill? So if you've got this approach where you're quite intentional about that or identifying opportunities to upskill and so on, presumably they'll come up. There'll be situations that arise where actually that skill that you're trying to develop or learn, or that knowledge that you're trying to acquire, you actually find it quite challenging. Has that happened to you, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I think it's not really the skill that's difficult. I think in the application of it is always the challenge. I remember I worked in this company. It was a social video company, and they had this great bunch of IP. They were like looking at licensing video content. They had this really interesting business model. And I remember I got brought in. I was working in a football club at the time, and they asked me to come in to lead their football strategy. So I was like a program lead, and it just had a huge target that wasn't really possible, probably. But it wasn't possible. And they gave me a great budget, but there was no team. And I just remember like applying a really bizarre logic of like, I'm going to not spend this money, and I'm going to work it and maneuver it with the team that I have and try and upskill it and scale it very quickly to get this quality content out. And it just didn't happen. So for 2 months, I just wasted time trying to like force it through the door. And then it's like, afterwards, I just remember like the awareness of myself and what I was trying to do with my own brute strength, rather than just rely on my team. And so, I learned in that lesson that fundamentally you need to actually build a really strong team. And actually, again, this comes down to like leadership as well. I've always historically been a doer. And so I will never allow something to fail. I will bring it over the line some way, shape or form. But then what I realized is there's this real need to create amazingly efficient structures. And you need amazingly efficient people to deliver those structures. So the first thing I got in any of my news business is operations. It's the first thing. I got an operations person. I know it's the area that I'm not as strong at. And I brought in operations persons, and they've been delivering a lot of automation and services. So the skill is the experience and being able to understand like what it takes to work and bringing that into my way of doing it. So it has taken me, my full career to perfect. And I always say perfect, but to get significantly better to I'm, in a place now where both businesses are very healthy and growing. And I think the challenge is just having the perspective and not trying to do stuff at all costs. Like you've got to be able to know the best paths and patterns for how businesses are run successfully.
Yeah. And on that piece around it's taking your full career to get here, we've got obviously a lot of people in our community who will be just starting out, so relatively young, coming out of education and going into work and thinking about their career, thinking about skills, thinking about where they need to get to. And I think increasingly there's a lot of kind of a lack of patience in terms of being on that trajectory and being able to achieve all sorts of things. How do you kind of strike that balance with that ambition that you've got and that drive to get things over the line and to, really kind of get to where you want to be, versus having that patience to develop the skills that you need and accept that it will take a long time?
I think it's the awareness of who you are. Again, like it's like if you're able to work in an environment, there are some traditional industries that just have a way of developing, nurturing talent, and they won't accelerate the process for anybody. And I think everybody's been slightly stopped by their line manager when they feel like they know exactly what it is that they're doing. But it comes from this idea that like, it took me this long, you can't do it in less. And so I'll intentionally hold you up. But I also think it's like, when we think we're ready, are we ready? And I think that takes a lot of awareness. And quite often people get frustrated or would leave their job because they're like, my boss is denying me. And I think you've got to know what's real and what's not. Like, are you actually ready? And if you are ready, then he shouldn't be blocking you, or he's so sexist, they shouldn't be blocking you. But I also think it's just the idea that actually if they are authentically believing you, they should be coaching you and mentoring you into that better outcome. So I think if you really think you're ready, you probably need to come out of that business and find something for yourself if it's that urgent to you. And I think that's what's been possible now. I also just think like the way that it used to work before, everything was a bottleneck. If you wanted to get into any industry, you needed to have It's people that co-signed you to get anywhere near it. Now, you know, if I want to do something, I just go online and do it. Like the barrier is so low, and yes, that means there's a lot more people doing it. But once you're good, the fruits of your labor are significantly more. So I would say if you're really somebody who just needs it now and you think you're ready and you're being held back, then just recreate that business and disrupt it on your own using the internet. But I think actually if you're not and you're aware that, you know, like you can't do that with law. I can't provide like law service on Instagram. So it depends on the industry, to be honest. But I do think more people this generation are, I say entitled, but I think I say it in a good way. I don't want to make that a label, like a wrong. It's not a wrong.
Yeah.
You feel you have connected to a right to have something because of how you see the world and how much you are probably more proficiently in tune with a digital first approach. So go create it for yourself. Don't sit there and wait for people to give you permission and then get angry at home. I think you gotta make it for yourself.
But is there some kind of trade-off though? Because if we're talking about someone that you know is desperate to achieve in their actual career, and it is in an industry where actually you could go off and disrupt it by creating something, maybe they're not particularly entrepreneurial and don't want to be a business owner, but they just want to, you know, kill it in their actual career as an employee. How do you then navigate that? Because you can't necessarily just go off and create something new.
Yeah, I think this is where partners became really important to me. I used to create businesses on my own and then just launch. And I never considered that the skill set I don't have, which is probably fundamental to it being successful, you know, if you haven't got the budget to hire it, you have to partner with it and create, you know, that understanding. And I never used to do that. I'm so like focused and driven. I'll just pick up the challenge and go do it myself and learn these things. As I said earlier, learn a bunch of all of these things rather than bring in just an expert and sit with them and partner with them and trust them that we're going to be shared in our vision. You know, my business is beloved. My business partner is fantastic. She does everything I can't do. Not that I don't want to. I just can't do it, and she does it very, very well, and that makes it an incredible partnership. And I think if we disrupted that, and I had someone that was just like me, and we were both like in the marketing department, strategy department, trying to outdo each other, we would have all this business and no delivery. So I think choosing your partners is really wise. And I think the good thing about the internet, you can find your kin and your likeness and your, you know, your tribe really, really quickly. You know, I've been on Clubhouse, the app, for the last 2 weeks or something, and I just keep meeting versions of myself. It's like, this is fantastic. This is great. And we're just having a conversation, and then we can just, you know, enroll each other in the stuff that we're doing. So it's been great.
Interesting. I've got a couple of other questions, but I just want to remind people who are watching, if you've got your own questions, drop them in the comments, and yeah, I'll pick those up before we wrap up, because yeah, we haven't got very long left. But just quickly on this piece around skills, and I think I mentioned at the very beginning that we've got a situation where millions of people just aren't studying, aren't thinking about skills. And when I say studying, very loosely, even thinking about very non-formal online bits and pieces, and that's going to obviously cause us a problem if, longer term. What are your thoughts, if any, on what we can do to actually encourage more individuals to have a, I guess, more positive attitude towards the importance of lifelong learning and that curiosity piece? Like how do we encourage that, and how do we develop that as humans?
I would say is you have to create the person that you actually are going to be, because it's not just about learning is fundamentally vital, but learning can come so many different ways. I think watching one of Will Smith's interviews, I think it was his Father's Day one he did with Jada, and he just said that I want my kids with me because they get to see up front how to be and what to learn, and they learn from life, like the practical elements, rather than what's in the book. So they never really did traditional school in that way. And in many ways, they've come out completely different to everybody else, but then at the same time, incredibly successful and incredibly rounded and balanced people. So you think to yourself that there's a different way of doing it, but you've got to be open to how we approach this. I kind of feel like we've all sucked ourselves into almost like a monolith of behavior. And there's always these disruptors. They always kind of pop up and they just say no. But I don't think education is linear. I think you use it as a tool in specific times when you need something to add value to what it is that you're doing. But it's not it's not the be all and end all. And I think this is why I say I think collaboration, partnership, but I do think the value of, you know, having that education and baking it into what it is that you're doing, it can still be so important. But it just depends on your personality. Do you have the personality to do that? Is that who you actually are? Because without it, you will constantly like get stuck in trying to learn more rather than do more. But I use, I just started working on my masters, and I'm going to keep going because I can. Like, that's just what I wanted to create for myself. So if you figure out, creating a personality that is, every time I don't know something, I'm going to go figure it out. And my way of going to figure it out is courses. Then I think that's a really good way to look at it, rather than what more information do I need to learn. Like, am I a curious person who's going to go and do the work, or am I someone that's going to partner, or am I someone that's going to, just try to do it anyway, probably get it wrong. But like, that's the kind of thing you have to figure out, who you are first.
Yeah. Interesting. We have a question from Rowan. Hi Marvin! ! How do you make sure you're always learning new skills at the rate that you want to?
Yeah, I think the rate is really important, but I as I said just now, I think if you say to yourself, I'm going to be these 3 things in every scenario in my life, I think it then dictates what you do. And I think it's easier to measure that, like, how are you being, rather than it is like everything I need to, there's a long list of stuff to learn. And I think about my marketing, and I went back and did a course on data, because data was getting so big and scalable. As I needed to know how to like visualize it, but also how to interpret it, and what biases to ignore and all those types of things. I think that was a really powerful additional tool to my skill set. But I've actually realized that spirituality probably serves me more more than actually the learning. So I start there, and then it tells me, I know exactly where to fill in the gaps, but to hone into my skill. So I in my head, I want to become the best strategist that people have encountered. And I think that comes from like looking at where the Venn diagram of what strategy is and where's those crossovers, and learning them all. Like if it's data, it could be analysis, and it could be, it could be mathematics. It could be so many different things that you can take on. It could be computer programming at a particular level. Whatever it takes to become that better strategist is fundamentally important. I've exercised in sort of creative as well, because I want to be able to understand design conventions, so I can interpret data into those conventions. I think all of those things matter. But I'm passionate about learning, but I think the bit that figured out what I needed to learn was based on who I actually am.
Yeah. And when you're looking at you've identified this thing that you want to learn, and it's for a purpose, right? You're going to go and often do a course. How do you make a determination as to the level of study for that particular thing that you want to do? So, you could jump onto Udemy and do a quick course to learn the basics. You could go and do a master's. So, like, how do you kind of make that decision?
Well, I think, is it your master skill, or is it something that adds to the skill you already have? And I think that's when you consider what level of investment, and I think also what level of uplift is it going to give you. So learning to do bookkeeping when I probably could just hire one, is that valuable enough? Like if I spend 4 hours a week, or even 10 hours a week doing bookkeeping, what am I taking out of my week to do that? And then what's the cost associated with that? I could be a credible salesperson, and if I'm doing all the sales and we're generating, I don't know, $250,000 a month or whatever it is, but I stop doing that so I can be a business leader and, sit and do the accounting, I'm losing money. If that's my gift and I'm the business leader from a sales perspective, learning how to count as well is probably a waste of time. So you want to be able to hire those skills in. And I think, so is it my master skill, or is it a value add? And that's how you base how much investment you put in.
And on a very practical note, where do you do these courses? What tools do you recommend, and what platforms do you recommend using?
Yeah, mine has always been with Middlesex University. I have a good relationship with them, and I've done some short courses with them on a few occasions. I've used Udemy before, Skillshare. I've used quite a lot of them. To be honest, I never really, because it depends. Like if I'm actually trying to be accredited, that's completely different. If I just want to know something, then that's also completely different. And so there are just platforms that come up which have a really good, like I think I remember when I launched my business when I was sort of 24, I was just looking for any form of business plan. I didn't really get how to fill it in. I remember I had this idea for an app. It was basically a car wash app, which was like Uber is, but just for car washes. So you can get your car washed by requesting it, similar to how Uber is requested. And I knew how to write a business plan, but I loved the idea so much that I intimately needed to know. And I just Googled it, and I found a really good platform to just like take me through it. But then since then, they've had some incredible brands pop up. So I use Udemy probably more than ever.
Yeah, I think we often get asked this question. It's like, start with YouTube, free resource, and there's a bunch of things.
You'll get a good percentage of the information from YouTube, and then I suppose just how specialists. Like if you want to fix your toilet, well, I've learned to unblock my toilet from going on there and using Wash Like liquid and hot water, and you're like, genius. But if I learned it the plumbing way, then I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be advising you that. So it depends on the level. I needed it for one time only. I didn't need it as I wasn't going to go out and become a professional plumber off the back of it. So again, it depends on the challenge.
I'm sure if you put your mind to it, you could.
I may do. They earn very good money. So later on in life, when I'm retired, I might just go around and become that person. More than happy.
Cool. Right. I'm conscious that we don't have that much time left. So just want to kind of wrap up with one final question. What would be your advice to, if you imagine an individual who is in their kind of early on in their career and wanting to kind of access a better kind of career opportunity for them, so not enjoying it and so on, like where do they actually start from a kind of practical perspective? Is it a kind of reflection piece? Is it kind of looking at the areas that they need to upskill? Is it identifying why they're not happy? Like what, in terms of thinking about a framework that people could actually adopt to step by step going through those steps to understand what path they should take? What would be your advice on that front? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but
no, I use Ikigai, which is a Japanese
Ikigai.
Yeah, and it identifies your purpose. It's Ikigai, and it identifies your purpose. I think it's basically what you're good at, what you get paid for, what does the world need, one additional thing, and then you basically fill in all of these elements, and it pushes you into an idea of like what your purpose actually is. And that's bringing in all your skill sets together, which I think is fundamentally important. So I start there. When I was doing my mentoring, I take people to do it and I push them to create it. And it really channels you and focuses you. But it also gives you a decision tree and a framework for what not to do as well as what to do.
That's perfect. Super practical. Thanks for sharing that tool. I think we'll probably send a message out to the people after this as well with the name and the details of that. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Marvin, for joining.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. It's been incredible, and there's going to be a lot of sound bites out of this and other gems that we want to share with people who have missed it. Because there's a lot of insights in a lot of the things that you had to say. I particularly love the stuff around happiness. Like I don't think that conversation happens enough. And so I'm really pleased that you raised that, because that hasn't come up so far in the series. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Bye everyone.
No. So that brings us to the end. We have interviewed 6 incredible people. Hopefully you guys have taken all sorts of notes and have learned from the experiences and the journey and perspectives of the people that we have interviewed so far. I'm really grateful to you guys for tuning in. And you'll be able to watch this back as well, and hopefully continue on your trajectories to be awesome people, but really and importantly fulfilling your own individual potential. We might come back with another season, so watch this space, but in the meantime, enjoy your evenings and thank you very much for joining us today. If you want to, obviously, as I said before, access the careers advice and insights that you need in your career journey, then jump onto the Career Ear platform. It's www.careerear.co.uk. Get yourself signed up to the platform, and hopefully that will help you on your journey. Thank you and good night.